Hey, welcome back to the show, MetFlex and Chill. This is Rachel Gregory, your host, and today we have a Q&A solo episode. So before we jump into the questions, I do want to announce a few things. So first announcement, I mentioned this in last week's episode, but the Keto For Women program is now live as a do-it-yourself program, or DIY if you want to call it. All of the information for that is on my website. I will link that in the show notes, or you can just go to metflexlife.com/keto-for-women. So if you've been interested in the Keto For Women program and you've been waiting to sign up, it is now open for enrollment and you can check out all the details on my website. So that's the first announcement. Super, super exciting. I've had a lot of ladies reach out to me wanting this program to be an ongoing enrollment program, and now it is. So definitely check that out if you're interested. The whole kind of process, the whole, I guess, what's the word? The gist of the program is basically for any woman who have gone through ketosis or gone through a ketogenic diet in the past. Maybe they got really, really great results in the beginning and they kind of came to this plateau, or they've come to this point where they've been in keto for a while, they've been low carb for a while, and they want to figure out how to reintroduce carbs to their diet. Maybe you've become a little bit carb phobic and you want to learn how to do this strategically so that you can have a little bit more of a balanced lifestyle. And that is what the Keto For Women program is all about. So it's teaching you how to reintroduce carbs in a strategic way while also focused on the main focus of the program is teaching you all about fat loss as well. So the fat loss fundamentals, how to, really debunk all the crap that's out there and learn what needs to happen in order to lose body fat and keep it off. Obviously with a keto background, that's the main kind of process that we're going through, but I teach you throughout the program, how to become more metabolically flexible. That's really the goal at the end of the day. And so that's what this program is. So it's for any woman who has experienced being in ketosis or gone through keto before and is looking to transition to becoming more metabolically flexible and really thriving in that regard. So check it out if you're interested. The next announcement is I am coming out with a muscle building course for women with my good friend and I guess you'd call her co-host of many things that we've been doing in the past, Ashley Van Houten. So that is going to be launching in early April, and I will have more announcements in the coming weeks with how to sign up if you're interested in that program. It's going to be a first come, first serve basis, and I'll have a list that you can, or I'll have a link that you can sign up to be on the list. So you're the first one to know when the program launches so that you have the ability to be first on the list to sign up. So stay tuned for that. And then last announcement, our sponsor for the month of February is Keto Brick and Live Savage Apparel. So my good friends Robert and Crystal Sykes own these companies. So they are sponsoring the podcast for the month of February. And they have a super cool launch coming up in just a few days, actually, on Valentine's Day. They're launching their new camo sports bra and leggings for their apparel. So they have green camo and blue and black camo. They actually sent me a few of the pieces of clothing, and I've tried them on. I love them. They're super high quality. They make everything like in-house, so they use the highest quality material possible, and it's really cool. So definitely check them out, both their company Live Savage Apparel and Keto Brick. I will link that in the show notes so you can check them out. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out about any of their products. And yeah, that's all we got today for announcements. Let's jump into the questions that I received from, these questions are coming from Instagram. So if you're not following me on Instagram, you should be following me. My handle is @rachelgregory.cns. All right, let's get into the show. All right, first question, what are your thoughts on strength training while being in ketosis long term? Can you still build muscle? Great question. So You can absolutely build muscle in ketosis. There's been several studies and lots of anecdotal accounts that show this. I actually have my own study that I did in grad school years ago looking at a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet combined with 6 weeks of CrossFit training, and it showed that the people taking part in the study who were in the ketogenic group were able to improve their body composition and their performance. So, and this was in non-elite CrossFit athletes. I always like to mention that. So just your average Joe going to CrossFit to get a good workout on, or good workout in. So if you're interested in that study, I will link it in the show notes. So it's absolutely possible to, build muscle in ketosis. However, personally, from my experience over the years, just with myself and with working with many, many clients, I'm not convinced that long-term ketosis is the best route to go for optimal muscle building. I just don't think that it's practical, but in terms of staying in ketosis long-term, especially if you are someone who is lean, like not even if you're super lean, but if you're like not overweight, you're not obese, you train, often, you're very active, you're not sedentary. I just don't think, unless you have a specific health issue, I don't think it makes sense to stay in ketosis long term, especially if the goal is to build as much muscle as possible. Carbohydrates they're a fuel source, and you can use that fuel source to build muscle. We know that from years of research and studies. And it's not that you can't build muscle in a ketogenic state and a low carb state. You absolutely can. But is it the most optimal thing to do? Probably not. So I think it depends, like I said, and I talk about this all the time, like where you're at on the spectrum, right? So are you, overweight and sedentary, or are you lean and active? Those are the two sides of the spectrum that I like to chat about. And then obviously most people are in between that, right? Not most people, but a majority of people, especially if you're listening to this podcast, are probably in the middle somewhere. But if your goal is to build muscle, then you probably aren't that sedentary, right? So really you want to think about this on that kind of spectrum, right? The leaner and active you are, probably the better you're going to do with some more carbs in your diet. And we're talking about like whole food carbs, healthy carbs, not like processed crap, right? So the leaner, more active you are, probably the better you'll do with carbohydrates, especially when it comes to performance and building muscle. And the more overweight and sedentary you are, probably the less carbs that you need in your life, because you have enough energy stores in your body to fuel whatever activity you're doing. So again, the leaner you get, probably the more advantageous carbs will be for you to incorporate, because you do have less fuel reserves to tap into. So you're probably also more insulin sensitive, right? And you can handle more carbs, right? And even if you start off in that category that is more overweight and more overweight, obese, and you're looking to build muscle, yes, maybe you cut the carbs, go keto for a while, and then once you lose that weight, as you get leaner, you're going to become more insulin sensitive, and so you'll be able to handle carbs a lot better. I also think that this is something that needs to be talked about with women as well. This is why I created my Keto For Women program, which is all about teaching women who have gone keto for a while. Yes, they got great results in the beginning, and maybe they've come to plateau, or maybe they just are looking to have a more balanced lifestyle, incorporate more carbs. I just talked to a client that I was onboarding on the phone yesterday who mentioned that she, wanted to have some watermelon with her kids, and she felt guilty because she wanted to eat a piece of watermelon. Like, what? And, that's actually the reality. And that's how I felt for a while. When I went keto for a while, I saw great results, great, mental clarity. I did lose weight in the beginning, and I was able to change my body composition a little bit, but I developed this carb phobia, and I developed this fear of consuming carbs. So sweet potatoes, fruit, watermelon, things like that. And, that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't be the case. These are, foods that are whole foods, right? I talk about whole foods being either have grown from the earth at some point or had a face at some point. Those are what are considered the category of whole foods, in my opinion. And you shouldn't be demonizing these things, right? So if you are on the leaner side, if you are a woman specifically, if your goal is to build as much muscle as possible, then you're probably going to do better incorporating some more carbs into your diet. I do believe that, I talk about this all the time in the podcast, there is a time and place to go into ketosis. I think that everybody should experience being in a state of ketosis at some point in their life, because it is a state that our body is, naturally goes into, especially, if you think about our ancestors who didn't have food available to them all the time, they would be going into a state of ketosis to fuel their bodies off of fat and ketones when they were, hunting or gathering food. There was a period of time where they went without food. So they would need that ability to go into ketosis and use their body fat and ketones for fuel. So it's a natural state, right? And I think that, in our, day and age, not many people are able to tap into that. So I think it's important. Obviously, this whole podcast is about metabolic flexibility. In order to become as metabolically flexible as possible, you should go through periods of, being lower carb, doing some fasting, getting into a state of ketosis. But does that mean you have to stay there forever? No, especially if you don't have some type of medical reason for doing that, especially if you're not overweight or obese. To me, it just doesn't make sense to stay there forever, especially just knowing the clients that I've worked with over the years, seeing this firsthand over the last 6+ years. Incorporating carbs can be very powerful if you do it strategically and if you are doing it for, I guess, the right reasons, in the sense of, you are not becoming super, super dependent on carbs and sugar as fuel, but you're giving your body that ability to use carbs for fuel when it's warranted, and then also use fat for fuel when it's warranted. So that whole, metabolic flexibility concept, right? So if building, kind of to wrap up this question, if building as much muscle as possible is your number one goal, and you're already on, let's say, the leaner side, and you don't have, a terrible relationship with carbs, I think incorporating carbs strategically is going to be advantageous for 95% plus of the people who fall into that category. I've seen it firsthand for myself, firsthand for other clients, and, carbs aren't the devil, right? You have to just incorporate them in a way that makes sense for your goals and for your lifestyle. And it is individual, but just overall, I don't think that it makes sense to stay in ketosis long term, especially if your main goal is to build muscle. So that's my take on it. Hopefully that made sense. Rambled on a little bit there, but hopefully that answered your question. And if you are interested in incorporating more, learning how to incorporate carbs more strategically, or kind of getting out of that carb phobic state, that is why I put together my Keto For Women program. And then also I work with clients one-on-one. So if you are interested in one-on-one coaching, you can always sign up, or you can always apply on my website at metflexlife.com/apply. I will link that in the show notes along with the link to the Keto For Women program, so you can check out more info on that. Okay, next question. Do you recommend snacking or trying to eat more at every meal? Okay, so I personally think this is highly individual. I think the biggest factor here would be to start with your metabolic health. So where you're coming from in terms of how healthy you are metabolically, and more specifically, what your kind of insulin and glucose levels are like, right? So if you're insulin resistant, right, or you have constantly high or elevated blood sugar levels, it might make sense to implement longer time between your meals so that you're not constantly spiking insulin and making your pancreas work harder than it needs to. Not that spiking insulin is a bad thing, right? Insulin is not the devil by any means. We need insulin to live and to function and to build muscle. But if you're someone who is developing insulin resistance, or developing insulin resistant, characteristics, right? So you're becoming more insulin resistant. You might be kind of on the edge of type 2 diabetes, right? That means that your pancreas is working really, really hard to keep up with the amount that you're eating. Specifically, if you are eating several times throughout the day, specifically if you're eating lots of carbs throughout the day, you're going to be spiking insulin throughout the day many times, and you're going to be spiking your blood sugar levels or your blood glucose levels. And basically how that works is whenever you eat, especially when you're eating carbs, you spike your blood sugar, and in order to take that blood sugar and energy out of your blood and into your cells. You have to use insulin becomes a player there. So you have to basically spike your insulin levels. Insulin's released from the pancreas to shuttle that glucose into your cells. And that is how our bodies work. If you are, spiking your blood sugar constantly throughout the day and it's becoming very high and it's taking a long time to come back down, that means that you're probably on your way to becoming insulin resistant, on your way to type 2 diabetes. We definitely don't want that. So again, it makes sense if you are struggling with, regulating your blood sugar levels and regulating your insulin levels. It makes sense to probably have a few less meals during the day, just because you'll give your body that time to, or basically you'll kind of give your pancreas a time to rest versus eating every few hours, right? On the flip side, if you're metabolically healthy and you're insulin sensitive, right, I think that it matters much less in terms of, how much you're eating throughout the day. The thing here to realize, though, is that in terms of what's more optimal, I would say personally, it's probably a good idea to make sure that you are having at least like 2 to 3 quote unquote larger meals throughout the day that specifically have sufficient amounts of protein. So that's the biggest thing, is if you're eating really, really small meals throughout the day and you're not getting a sufficient amount of protein in each meal, probably around or anything, between 25 to 40 or 50 grams, depending on your personal body size, that is probably going to be not advantageous, because we know that it's important to get a good bolus of protein to be able to spike muscle protein synthesis, which is important for growing muscle, maintaining muscle. And if you're not getting sufficient protein if you're not getting a sufficient amount of protein at those meals, so if you're consuming like less than, say, 25 grams of protein at your meals, you're not going to basically have enough of the amino acid leucine, which is really important for spiking muscle protein synthesis. So a good rule of thumb is to make sure that at least 2 to 3 of your main meals throughout the day, I would say even, 3, especially if your goal is to build muscle, and maintain as much muscle as possible, it probably makes sense to have at least 3 meals a day that have at least 25 grams, like minimum protein from good quality sources. So animal sources would be my first recommendation, because we know that animal sources are the most bioavailable form of protein, and they tend to have more leucine than plant-based sources of protein. So that would be kind of the caveat there when we're talking about meals per day and eating smaller meals versus larger meals. If you're, not eating larger meals because you have trouble digesting them for some particular reason, that's kind of a different conversation. But if you do just prefer smaller meals and some snacks, I think that's totally fine. If that's what allows you to adhere best to whatever nutritional goals you have, as long as, like I said, as long as 2 to 3 of those meals have a sufficient amount of protein in them to allow you to get the most out of that muscle protein synthesis response from each meal, right? So at least 25 grams, probably between 30 and 50 grams of protein per meal, per main meal is a good place to shoot for. Personally, I like to eat a lot. So I like to have like 3, main meals throughout the day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Unless I'm fasting, some days I fast through breakfast and I'll just have like a bigger lunch and a bigger dinner. But I'll make sure that when I do have snacks, like say I have lunch and dinner and then an afternoon snack, I make sure that snack contains at least 25 grams of high quality protein. So whether it's from, like Greek yogurt mixed with some protein powder, that's a really good snack. You can have, a protein shake if you want, or a protein ice cream. I make that a lot for dessert. So that's the biggest thing, but I think it's very individual. There's no, I guess, hard rules when it comes to the meals that you're eating throughout the day. Unless, like I said in the beginning of answering this question, unless you are struggling with some metabolic health factors where you are, insulin resistant, or you are on your way to type 2 diabetes, it might make sense to give your pancreas a break throughout the day and not eat as often, so that you aren't making your pancreas work harder than it needs to, right? So that would be kind of my recommendations there. There was one other thing that I was going to mention. Oh, so in terms of eating throughout the day too, it does make sense also to try to eat kind of at the same time. So try to like put your feeding schedule on something that you can repeat daily, because this will help as well with your circadian rhythm and making sure that stays in check. So, not just like our circadian rhythm is not just based off of, sleeping at night. A lot of people hear circadian rhythm and they think, okay, that has to do with your sleep, but it also has to do with, what you're doing, what's happening with your body throughout the day, right? So the times that you eat throughout the day, your body starts to get used to that, and it starts to get used to those feedings. And the more regular or regulated you can have those feedings, the better off you're going to be for your circadian rhythm. So, if you have specific times throughout the day that you're eating, I would say stick to those times as best as you can, because that's probably going to be advantageous for you overall, health-wise, circadian rhythm-wise, and that's probably going to benefit you the most. But in terms of answering the question, do you recommend snacking or trying to eat more at every meal? I think it depends on the person. I think protein is the biggest thing that you need to think about. Your metabolic health is another thing that you have to think about, and also what you can adhere to best, right? What allows you to get through your day while feeling full, feeling satisfied, and allows you to stick within your specific goals. That would be the main thing. Hopefully you got some tidbits of information out of this episode. Hopefully I answered your questions. Another shout out to our sponsor for this month, Keto Brick and Live Savage Apparel. If you want to check them out, I will link their website in the description. They have a launch coming up on Valentine's Day for their apparel, and you can also check out their different Keto Brick flavors on their website as well. And yeah, that's all I got. As always, if you're enjoying this episode and if you're enjoying the podcast in general, please share it out to anybody you think that would be interested. It really helps to spread the word about the show, helps more people get interested, and helps me out a lot. So that would be awesome. And you can leave a rating and review on iTunes if you haven't already. That would be great as well. And if you want to check out anything that I have to offer in terms of nutrition and exercise programs, other resources, free recipes, blog posts, a few of the ones that I mentioned in this episode, those are all on my website at metflexlife.com. All right, I'll chat with you next time.